In this module, we look at two uses for a conceptual model. The first is in testing your understanding of the business, and the second is in measuring business performance. Now, I'm using a notation which I'll explain more fully later, but initially there's a structured reading technique that I'll introduce you to by way of example when we look at the first way of using a model. So let's use that reading technique to test whether our model is accurate or not. So we'd say each delivery point must be for one and only one company. That's the relationship between delivery point and company. Now I can test the relationship by inverting the reading technique. I can say it's not possible for a delivery point to be for more than one company. And the assertion there is something which very often triggers sometimes not a violent reaction, but certainly a noticeable reaction in a business person who say, well, no, that's not possible, that's not right. I know of a delivery point that's shared. So then you can follow that up with a couple of other questions. The first thing would be, can you give me an example of that? So this is when the business person comes back and says, yes, you know, we have a delivery point which is shared by Walmart and a mom and pop store next door. So there's an example of where a delivery point is not for one and only one company. That's for where a delivery point is for more than one company, and that means your model is wrong. So that's good. We've discovered an error in the model. The model does not represent the real world, and we're engaged in a conversation with the business person to follow that up. The second question then I would suggest that we can follow up with is, well, what would the implications of that be? What are the implications of a shared delivery point? This will then introduce a conversation about how we perhaps assess the performance of a company. If the delivery point is an important part of the performance of, say, on-time deliveries, are there any implications of that delivery point being shared by two of your customers, and so on. But the model then acts as quite a good artifact in the shared communication process. So in summary, what I've done there is firstly introduced the reading technique. Each delivery point must be for one and only one company. Inverted it in order to test the model. It's not possible for a delivery point to be for more than one company. Discovered that that's not true and taken that on board, and now we're into a process of discovering the implications of that and how to modify the model so that it more accurately reflects the real world. And all data models are used to this process of evolving a model. What we can do with a conceptual model that's very simple to read is that whole process becomes much easier and more approachable from a business person's point of view, to the extent where I know a number of business people who create these models themselves and continually test them and check them and improve them in order to get a better version of a shared set of semantics that are accurate. Okay, so here's the second thing that you can use a conceptual model for. It's the idea of using it to specify ways of measuring business performance, and this can be quite useful in phrasing business intelligence inquiries or reporting requirements and so on. So I've just mocked up a small portion of a model here so that you get the idea of how this works. Imagine we're having a conversation with, say, a director of sales, and the director of sales has asked us for some intelligence to give him an idea of how well the business is performing. He's asked us for actual against plan by sector. So for all the different sectors in the business, can you show me my actual against plan? And so if you look at the model, the first thing that strikes you is, of course, that there isn't an obvious immediate way of answering that query from the model here. We have nothing called actual and nothing called plan on there, so that would instantly cause the first part of a conversation to decide what it is exactly that you mean by actual against plan. We have got in the top left hand corner here the sector, so we've got part of the solution that the sales director was asking for. But let's have that discussion and say as a result of that discussion the actual against plan turns out to be the volume delivered. So when he uses the term actual, what he really means is the total volume delivered, which is an attribute in our model against delivery item. And when he talks about plan, he's talking about how well the volume delivered compares to the target volume, which is an attribute down here in the bottom left, which is set. So, and if you look at the model, what we're saying here is that each target must be for one and only one sector. So immediately we can summarize the target volume by sector using this relationship here. When it comes to the actual, in order to compare the actual against the target volume for a given sector, however, it's a little bit more difficult, because here we've got two ways of getting the answer, if you like. So one is to take the volume delivered on each delivery item on all the deliveries under agreements made with customers, and for each customer use the sector for that customer there. But there is an alternative route that says for each delivery item we can take the volume delivered on that delivery, where that delivery is for a customer who may be different to the customer that you made the original agreement with. It's possible, for example, you make an agreement with a customer that's a holding company, but you deliver to the subsidiaries of that customer directly. So one of the questions we'd have to clarify with our sales director is whether we want actual volume delivered using the customer we delivered to and their sector, or whether we use the customer with whom you have the agreement and their sector. So let's say, for example, we've had that discussion, and our sales director wants to use this route, the customer agreement route, to get the volume delivered there. We can then have a further discussion about the time that we're using, the period that we're going to give this data for. You can see again that each target must be for one and only 1 month, and therefore we can take targets either at the monthly level, or we can summarise the months up to annual targets, or both. Whereas the deliveries, we know the day that the delivery item occurred, so we could actually do total volume at the daily level for the actuals. So let's say that we're going to use we're going to have monthly level summaries for both the targets and the actuals from the delivery items, like that. So in summary, what I've done here really is to use the conceptual model and the business terminology on it to have a discussion with the sales director, so that we can firstly clarify what the sales director means when he says actual against plan, that we can unambiguously state which sector we're using for the actual volume delivered, to compare against the target volume for that sector, and the granularity in terms of the time here that's being used to display the data on the report. And there may be other, I've taken some dimensions off this model, and there may be a number of other dimensions that need exploring in order to fully satisfy the requirement. The point here, of course, is that we can use that conceptual model as a communication device to be clear and unambiguous, completely definitive about the specification of requirements for the report. So I hope that's whetted your appetite a little bit for the kind of things we can use a conceptual model for. The remainder of this video series deals with how do you go about creating and using conceptual models like this, starting with Module 5, a notation for conceptual modelling.